Hello everyone! In this video we will show you how to finish your leather accessories with edge paint. In leathercraft you always say, with the stitching you can tell the experience and the knowledge of a leather crafter, but with the edge finishing you can tell his or her patience. In our opinion, that's 100% true. It's not really complicated to finish off the edges with edge paint, but the more patience you have, the nicer your end result will look. We will now show you how to apply the first layers of base coat, then sand in between layers for better appearance, and then finish off with edge paint. Let's get started. To work on the leather edges you need a base coat, the edge paint in the same color as your chosen leather, a roller dye pen to apply the liquids, a sanding sponge, as well as document clips or a couple of drinking cups. The base coat is the primer that is applied to the leather edge before the edge paint. It seals the edge and then creates a nice curve before you apply the edge paint as the final finish. Between the individual layers, the edges are slightly roughened with the sanding sponge in order to level them and ensure better adhesion of the next layer. We start by applying the first layer of base coat. To do this, dip the roller dye pen into the base coat and roll it over the edge to distribute the base coat evenly. You should only use a very small amount of base coat for the first layer, because with this layer, it's all about sealing the leather and creating a basis for the next layers. It could also be that the leather fibers open up a little and that you have not yet achieved a complete seal, as the base coat first penetrates the leather. This is completely normal, and at the beginning you can also see a groove between the different layers of the leather and the lining. Let the base coat dry for 20 minutes. When everything is dry, roughen the edge with the sanding sponge to level the edge and prepare it for the next layer. Base coat always adheres better to a rough surface than to a smooth one. When sanding, make sure that you only sand perpendicular to the edge and never at an angle. Otherwise you will sand the thread with it and tear the seam apart. Remove the sanding residue with your finger or a cloth. Now apply the second layer of base coat with a bit more liquid than the first layer. This now has to dry for 1 or 2 hours until it has completely dried. Only then you can sand and level this layer again. Now repeat the process of sanding and applying the base coat until you are satisfied with the shape and the appearance of the edge. Usually, you need 2 to 5 layers of base coat, depending on how many layers of leather you want to join together and depending on how important a completely even result is to you. If you are satisfied with how it looks, you can slightly roughen the base coat again and apply the edge paint. When you apply the edge paint, you will notice that it is a little thinner than the base coat. Accordingly, you should be careful to not go over the edge too much, especially at the corners. After applying the edge paint, we recommend that you roll the roller dye pen along the edge one more time at a slight angle in order to apply edge paint everywhere so that the base coat is no longer visible. This is particularly important with darker leather colors where you can easily see through the milky white base coat. Depending on the result, you can apply 1 to 3 layers of edge paint. In between, you should always slightly roughen the edge with the sanding sponge before you apply the next layer. For the last layer, you only apply the paint and let it dry well. And here are a few more tips. To avoid dripping and building up edge paint and base coat at the corners, you shouldn't use too much base coat and always spread it over the entire length of the edge evenly. Sometimes it takes a few seconds for the base coat to spread itself evenly, and then larger amounts often build up at the corners. You should then even this out again. If you are unsure, use several thinner layers rather than a few thick layers. If the base coat or the edge paint spill onto the coated leather side or run over the edge, it is best to rub it off directly with your finger while it's still wet. Alternatively, you can let the paint dry well and then carefully rip it off with your finger. Due to the friction and the heat that is generated by your finger, the edge paint then separates from the leather. Also, make sure not to forget to sand between layers. The more layers there are on top of each other, the more important it is, as the subsequent layers adhere better to roughened surfaces. Sanding is not only there to smooth out the edges, but also to roughen it for better adhesion and a longer lasting result.